Hi everyone and welcome back to Early Bird Photo News. With the Black Friday bonanza up on us, there's naturally not many new camera or lens releases this week, but you might be able to get yourself a great deal on some existing products, and we're going to look at that a little bit later on. There's been so much talk about the Sony A9 III with its amazing global shutter, and last week there was also the news that Nikon is potentially bringing out a new lower megapixel camera with high frame rates and a global shutter as well. So naturally, one of the cameras everyone thought will likely get a global shutter as well when it will be released is the Sony A1 Mark II. But according to Sony Alpha rumors, first of all, the Sony A1 Mark II seems to be still ages away, and secondly, Sony is not planning on giving that camera a global shutter. Now that may disappoint some people, but when we look at the advantages and disadvantages of the global shutter, it seems to make sense to have it more in video-centric cameras or lower megapixel sports cameras at the moment, rather than in higher megapixel cameras that are aimed at the perfect image quality, because we have the limitations of the ISO range and less dynamic range, and these two things is not really something future A1 users or A1 Mark II users would want to give up, would you? So on these cameras, similar to the R5 Mark II and the R1 as well, it seems to make sense to have very fast stack sensors that have minimal rolling shutter but give you the maximum of image quality. What surprised me probably more than reading that the A1 won't have a global shutter is that it seems to be still a long time away from being released. The A1 is still a fantastic camera, so there's no immediate need to replace it, but at the very least you would have thought that Sony was going to update it via firmware or release a successor relatively soon so it has all the new features like the eye tracking and video mode, for instance. There is a firmware update coming for the A1 that will, for instance, add the focus breathing, but there's still a lot of other things that people would want that are in lower end cameras that the A1 currently doesn't have. So no major firmware updates and an A1 Mark II still being ages away is a little bit disappointing, but I guess at this stage it might not really be needed because of course the A1 is still a fantastic camera. What do you guys think? Would you love to see an A1 Mark II relatively soon, or are you still happy with your A1s? Speaking about cameras that are still ages away or may never actually make it to the market, it looks like Canon is not actively working on releasing a high megapixel version of an R5 anytime soon. Over the last few years, there was always speculation that Canon would be releasing like an R5S, similar to an 5DS back in the day. That was a higher megapixel version of a 5D, and thus now would be a higher megapixel version of an R5 with maybe 75 to 100 megapixels. There has been speculation on and off that this camera might come, but for now it looks like that Canon is not really working on releasing such a camera, and if they do, it still might be years away. Personally, for me, it's not really disappointing because I think an R5 Mark II with a stacked sensor and a 50 megapixel range is more than enough for most applications, but maybe for some higher end studio work or some high end magazine work, a higher megapixel camera would be desirable. Over the last 2 weeks, I've had not much time to do much editing because I've been working on a new website and some other projects, but the last few days it just felt like I needed to edit some more images from my last road trip, and so I went through the files and found a few more photos that I really liked. The first image I tackled was of these Carpentarian grass rings. The biggest challenge with this photo was that the birds were somewhat in shade and the rock was a bit brighter and the background was also a bit brighter than the bird, so I tried to balance that all out with a few different selective colors and curves layers. It's not an easy bird to photograph, so I was super happy to get away with a few photos. Another bird we came across on our road trip was the elusive chestnut-breasted quail thrush, and I got some nice photos of the male and the female, and right towards the end I was also able to get a shot of the male taking off. However, when I looked at the raw file, I really liked the pose, but the photo wasn't 100% sharp. In the past, I usually disregarded these shots because I could just never get them right, and even when I tried Topaz Sharpen AI, for instance, it often didn't really work, but I thought, I don't have anything to lose, let's run it through Topaz Photo AI. And to my surprise, it was able to recover the photo and give me a nice, relatively sharp version of my quite out of focus RAW file. So in this case, Topaz Photo AI really worked super well and saved the day. Are you guys using Topaz Photo AI or Sharpen AI and were able to save some of your photos with the sharpening tools? Make sure to let me know because I would love to hear some more success stories. I was always a bit skeptical about it in the past, but I must admit on this photo it definitely saved the day for me. Speaking about software that saves the day for me, there's another little helper that I love to use in Photoshop and Lightroom, and that's DxO's Nik Collection. In particular, in the Nik Collection, I love using the Pro Contrast filter, the White Neutralizer filter, and the Detail Extractor. These 3 filters definitely help me to get out a bit more detail in certain areas and also help me perfectly to deal with color casts in my photos. So at the end of the day, the photos come out really nice and clean and sharp. Have you ever heard of the Nik Collection? I know most people don't really know about it, but it's one of the plugins that I use almost on all of my photos. And in saying that, if you want to learn and improve your image editing, I would highly recommend that you check out my Pro Sets and Masterclass down there in the description. With my Pro Sets, I allow you to do one-click RAW editing and get your RAW files to a great starting point. And in my Masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need in Photoshop to make your own images look amazing, so you can confidently tackle the editing process and get the most out of your own photos. So if that's of interest to you, make sure to check this out down there in the description. I know a lot of Canon shooters have been waiting for some fast wide-angle prime lenses to shoot astrophotography, for instance, and it looks like we're finally going to get some Canon lenses early next year with a 14mm, 24mm, 28mm and 35mm f1.4 lenses likely coming early next year. And I think that's going to be pretty exciting for many photographers. Are you one of them, or are you saying wide-angle lenses is not really my thing? And now to the phrase that we all hate the most, especially when we just order new gear. Demand has far exceeded expectations, and thus delivery times are uncertain, or there will be lengthy delays in the delivery times. This is a statement Sony has released for their new 2.8 300mm lens that was only available in February next year anyways, but already they're saying there will be lengthy delays. But I must admit, I'm kind of sick of hearing this by now. I know there had been issues with COVID and other things, but by now I feel like the manufacturers might actually need to change the expectations, because it's kind of ridiculous to release this statement on every new release, whether it's Canon, Nikon or Sony or some other brand. So fingers crossed that hopefully they get these issues under control, because I really find it annoying if you buy something, you're excited about it, and then will only be delivered like a year later. So I'd rather have them deliver it later and not announce it so early than announcing it early and then having to wait for it forever. What's your take on that? In saying that, I also wonder how the camera market will fare going forward. During the COVID times, it was really high demand. Everyone wanted cameras, everyone was buying gear, but that's slowly but surely sort of quieting down a little bit. And with the cost of living going up so high, I wonder how sustainable it is for many people to buy the latest and greatest gear all the time. So hopefully some of the Black Friday deals coming up this week will help us to save some money. Although I must admit, I'm always a little bit disappointed, because it seems like whichever products I've been looking at that I really wanted to buy never seem to receive a discount on Black Friday. It's often the products that I already have or that I don't want that seem to get massive discounts, whereas the products that I really want, like a new drone for instance, doesn't seem to get much or any discounts at all. Am I alone with this, or do you feel the same? Is it always the other products that you don't really want to get a big discount? There's definitely some great deals to be had, especially on some older cameras like an R5 on Z7 Mark II or Z6 Mark II on A7 R5 for instance. Adobe has some deals going on, Topaz has deals going on, DxO has deals going on. So if you're looking at updating your current software and your little tools and plugins, this could definitely be a great time to save some money. What are the things that you would have loved to buy this Black Friday? Are there any special deals that I've missed out on that I should look at? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Interestingly though, newer is not always better, and this is something we should remember in all these crazy sales, because for instance, I've been thinking about updating my M1 Max MacBook Pro to an M3 Max MacBook Pro, but it seems like for a lot of the tasks that I do, the newer MacBook is not actually faster. For instance, denoising a RAW file in Adobe Photoshop or Camera Raw takes the same amount of time on my M1 Max MacBook Pro as it takes on my friend's M3 Max MacBook Pro. So there's no time savings there. There's probably some time savings in other areas like video editing, but for now I feel like my M1 Max MacBook Pro is still quite adequate and quite fast. The interesting difference though was between the M1 Max MacBook Pro and the M1 or M2 Pro MacBook Pros with the Pro processor, because in these cases, the M1 Pro, for instance, took almost 42 seconds to denoise an image, whereas the M1 Max took 20 seconds to denoise an image. So for instance, if you're looking to get yourself a good deal on a new laptop, you might be able to buy like an M1 Max or an M2 Max, for instance, rather than one of the latest models, and still get almost the same speed and quality at a lower price. And lastly, the Nikon ZF has already received a firmware update, firmware 1.1, that will add things like slow motion video to the camera, which is fantastic. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this week's early bird photo news. Please make sure to check out my channel membership. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye guys.